Hi, my name's Londe Yusuf.
And my name is Reggie Williams.
And we're the co-founders of Black Film Space. Black Film Space is a grassroots organization dedicated to enhancing the skill sets of Black filmmakers and building a community of creatives. We host events such as screenwriting workshops, panels, mixers, and other events that are designed to support Black content creators.
In our next episode of the Black Film Space podcast, we sit down with Kyle Brett, an entertainment lawyer. We talk to Kyle about the best practices to protect yourself as an actor or filmmaker, as well as his opinion on why Black creatives are more likely to short themselves at the negotiating table. Before we begin the interview, we have a few brief announcements. Coming up this month in March 2019, we're hosting a screening series called Cinema for Her. Every Wednesday, we're going to screen a classic film that's centered around Black women and follow up with a discussion. This will be at La Co Cafe at 195 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn. Admission is free with a one-drink minimum. On March 16th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, we're hosting our first webinar on Instagram with Shannon E. Johnson. Shannon is a former Sci-Fi Network executive turned professional script consultant, and she will be detailing how to pitch to a room of executives. On March 21st, we're hosting our monthly screenwriting workshop at Studios 150 in Midtown Manhattan. On March 28th, we're hosting a producing shorts and features panel featuring Marquise Stillwell and Dominga Martin. Marquise is the founder of Open Docs, a production company, and was the executive producer of the award-winning documentary Shield and Spear. Dominga has produced several music videos which have been featured on MTV and BET. Lastly, we're hosting our 4th annual screenwriting retreat from June 19th to 23rd. The Black Film Space Screenwriting Retreat is a 5-day, 4-night excursion designed to offer screenwriters a quiet space to focus on their writing and connect with like-minded creatives. We also incorporate optional screenwriting workshops, yoga, meditation sessions, table dinners, and nature walks. The deadline for the first deposit is April 1st. For more info on all these events, go to blackfilmspace.com. Now, on to our interview.
Hi guys, this is Kyle A.B. He's an entertainment law attorney. So I'm going to kick off with the first question, which is, how did you get into entertainment law?
So I was a corporate lawyer for 3 years, and then I wanted to really, I was not happy in my position, but I really wanted to help Black creatives. So through a combination of networking and just and looking for the best entertainment law firm in New York City I could get into, and with hiring, I I started looking, and I fortunately fell into a really great practice now. It took a while, but it's definitely worth it.
So, Kyle, what made you choose entertainment law as an area of focus?
Right. So I was a corporate lawyer for 3 years, and then
What do corporate lawyers do? Everyone says corporate lawyer.
I don't know. We hate our lives. That's the first and foremost thing you do. So corporate law. I was at a big firm in New York. I was an M&A lawyer. And, I think the easiest and shortest way to explain it is, if a company wanted to be bought, let's say Pepsi, I don't know, I'm doing this off the top of my head. Let's say Pepsi wanted to buy a water company. If we represented Pepsi, we would make sure that all the representations that the water company was making in terms of the documents they were producing were accurate. We would just be making sure the actual contract for Pepsi to buy the water company, provided Pepsi with favorable language. We would actually be reviewing some of the agreements that the water company has with, Maine, and the water company has with, New Hampshire, and we would just be not auditing, but making sure we understood exactly what Pepsi was buying. That's probably the easiest way of explaining M&A law, and that's what I did for 3 years. And then I just was really, really unhappy, which is probably the story of a lot of young Black associates at these major law firms. And I was, I think I I think I'm partially creative, and I think I'm also, I care. I'm empathetic about Black creatives, and so I thought if I was going to continue to be a lawyer, that it made sense for me to try to get in a position to help Black creatives. So after 3 years of being at the law firm, I, wanted to find my way into entertainment law. So that I could, be an entertainment lawyer, but also like in my just profession, just be able to help and advise Black creatives. So after 3 years, that's how I got into it.
So how's it been with entertainment law? What do you normally run into in terms of helping clients?
Yeah, so it's good. So I work at a firm. And so a lot of, when you first come to a firm as an associate, a lot of your practice is servicing, the partner's clients. So like, I don't know, let's say the partner's client is Denzel Washington. And, a lot of what you'll be doing is just, helping that partner with whatever Denzel needs. But in your like just day-to-day life, like when you're out and you're at an event and people see you and they know that you're an entertainment lawyer, they obviously ask you questions. The day-to-day is reviewing a lot of different types of agreements, or any type of agreement that an actor, writer, producer, showrunner, director might deal with. For example, there can be a contract, an actor agreement with Denzel Washington to star in Equalizer 3. And in part of that, dealing with his agreement, you want to make sure he's protected in a lot of obvious ways, such as making sure he receives a compensation that everyone's agreed he should receive, but also some non-obvious ways, like, making sure that he's not exclusive to the project for 7 or 8 months during post-production, and that he's able to take on more work.
How does someone who is relatively new to the industry navigate using legal counsel? Because that's something I think a lot of people struggle with. At what point do they introduce a lawyer into, their negotiations, and especially in a way that's still fairly affordable?
Right. So I think there's 2 parts to that question. I think the first part is that there's an order of operations in terms of the representatives that you want to onboard onto your career. So the first representative that you want to onboard onto your career as a Black creative is a manager. That is your ace boon coon. That's your and a manager really has to be someone who completely understands what you want for yourself, where you want to be when you're at the pinnacle of your career. The second person is somewhat interchangeable. It's either your agent or your lawyer, but it's certainly secondary to your manager. Your agent, unlike your manager, well, I shouldn't say unlike, but your agent is going to focus heavily on finding business opportunities for you. Whereas your manager is just making sure that these business opportunities make sense and that these business opportunities are in line with the direction that you want to head. The lawyer is making sure that these business opportunities are favorable and protective of your interests. So those are the 3 roles that, I think all Black creators should be thinking of, and that's kind of the concert in which you should be thinking of them as. So, but the issue, and I think this gets to your point really, is that your lawyer is probably the only one who has an actual, I don't even know, maybe not ethical, but almost like a professional obligation to your best interest.
Yeah.
So your agent, I always try not to talk bad about agents, especially on the record, but your agent, your agent can just be for example, let's say hypothetically there was a movie that recently won an Oscar about a white man driving a black man, right? Like
No,
your
is this a
agent,
hypothetical?
this hypothetical, complete
Okay.
hypothetical, right? Let's say there was a movie that like won a few days ago about that. Your agent could be like, yo, you need to do that. You need to take something exactly like that, right? And your manager could mistakenly be like, no, don't do that. Like, that's not at all who you want to be like. And so, it's hard to, there's some lack of impartiality in both your manager and your agent, because your agent's just gonna want to take, gonna want you to take, as many jobs as possible, as higher paying jobs as possible. And sometimes your manager's just a little bit too close to the Mona Lisa and like doesn't really have perspective. And I think your lawyer, unfortunately or fortunately for us, does have that kind of middle ground perspective. And so you see a lot of creatives turning to their lawyer for that impartial advice in business and professional, and just like, for example, like when a lot of creatives want to fire their manager or their agent, they turn to their lawyer. Like that's kind of the role that the creatives play. So to answer your long-winded way of answering your question, I think it comes secondary to your manager, but I understand that being protected and having some impartial counsel is so vital, especially for Black creatives, that there can be a sense of urgency to quickly have a lawyer, which I think is something everyone has to balance. The other part about your question was regarding payment, and I think most talent firms, especially if you're talking about a firm and not just like a solo practitioner, most of those places will operate on a 5, or I think it should be 5, but 5 or 10% contingent compensation, which is, I personally, I don't think this is just me drinking the Kool-Aid, but I really do think that's beneficial for young actors, because it's like, if you make $100 to star in this movie, and I spend 3 hours on your agreement, I'm not charging you a billable rate, not like I would if I was at a corporate law firm, right? Which my billable rate could be $90 an hour, $100 an hour. So let's say I did this agreement for you. You're only making $100 on it, but my billable rate's $100 for 3 hours. So I'm going to charge you $300 for 3 hours for something that you are only getting paid for $100. Like, it just doesn't make economic sense.
Yeah.
But most talent firms, especially the ones that I think a lot of people are represented by, operate on a 5% basis. And so that means if you're making $0, we're making $0. If you're making $100, we're making $5, right? Like it grows with however much you're receiving. And honestly, truthfully, like a lot of these boutique entertainment law firms, when you're just starting out and you're like not making anything, they're not going to collect, because the idea is like, we're almost invested in you in a sense. It's like, we believe so much in you, like we're just trying to get you to a place where you can be making $2 million a film. And then at that point, certainly, right, or like before that,
Yes.
but like, yeah, at that point it's like, okay, cool, we've represented you for 5 years for free, I hope you don't mind 5% of 2 million.
Mm-hmm.
So that I think that's the second part, the second answer to your question, which is like, really try to find these. I think the solo practitioners are great and extremely vital, but I think they are also dealing with, they need to pay for their rent, and they need to pay their own bills, and so they may be charging a flat rate, or they may be charging a billable rate. But if you're able to find a firm that will take you on a 5% basis, that can be ideal. The problem, last point, is that a lot of the clients that firms take come from referrals from managers, right? So it's like, if you're, and this again, it goes back to the order of operations, but if you can just get a manager that's really great and everyone was like, wow, I really respect this manager, and the last, this manager managed Eddie Murphy, and so I know that if they're bringing me this person must be the next real deal. I think a great manager is a signifier to both agents and lawyers.
So you've mentioned Black creatives a few times. What would be, in your experience, the difference that you see between Black creatives and non-Black creatives in this industry?
Yeah. So first, and like the just such big thing is that, I don't know, and this is anecdotal, of course. Like, I'm sure someone would be like, this is not true, but I really feel like a lot of the Black creatives I deal with are like all the way in on their creative project. Meaning like they're like, if this doesn't work, like there's no fallback plan, there's no Superman or Batman coming to my rescue. Like, this is it. And this is what I'm all in on. And so I do think that like that makes the urgency for finding the next thing that's going to take you to, become a series regular who's paid $30,000 a year. I think that it makes you obviously less impatient, in an obvious way. And so that's probably one anecdotal thing I'll say. The other anecdotal thing I'll say is like, I think, there's, not for, I was going to say for whatever reason, but not for whatever reason. It's by intentional or unintentional design, is that there's not a lot of Black lawyers in Black creative spaces. And so it's really hard to find, someone who can just sit down with you and walk you through, a standard TV weekly contract. And so a lot of the Black creatives I've seen are just very inclined to just sign things. Mm-hmm. And that ties into the first part, which is like, man, I need to get on. And so I've had so many friends who like are in that headspace, and so they're like, oh, BT wants me to work on the show, and they want me to star in 7 episodes, and that's so dope. And then they gave me this contract. I'm just gonna sign it. I'm like, man, they're not paying me anything. And they're like, yeah, but this is their form contract. I'm like, this is their form contract. Like, you're able to negotiate. And I think a lot, especially in the music industry, a lot of my younger friends, like 20, 24, 25, 26, they just like didn't even know you could like mark up a contract, right? Like they thought, in their mind, oh, Sony gave me this contract. Can you just review it and tell me what it says, right? And so they weren't even thinking like I was going to, or the lawyer was going to like send a marked copy back and be like, no, we're not agreeing to this. We're not agreeing to this. And so I think for me, like, that is always, a lot of my friends and a lot of the people my friends introduce me to are just, they just are so sign happy for a lot of different reasons. And that's one thing I think I wish we could change for sure.
Yeah, just you saying this now sparks new information for me, because I'm just thinking that I would only be able to negotiate if I had leverage. If I was, let's say I was an actor on a beat show, not a famous actor, up and coming actor, and they're paying me, like you said, $30,000 a year. Why couldn't they just find somebody else that would take that amount of money? Like, what leveraging power do I have in that situation?
Yeah, and again, like, I am sympathetic to Black creatives, so like I completely understand where it's like that sense of scarcity. That sense of, not, it's like, man, this is it. Like, I need this. Like, even if it's a role in a film, like, and they're not paying me anything, and I have to pay my flight, and I have to do, like, man, I just need an opportunity. Like, I get that, and part of that is like admirable, and so it's a sense of the hustle, but like, there's always a chance to speak up for yourself. You know what I mean? Like, There's always, and honestly, like I tell my friends and my clients this all the time. If you send like if I mark up a contract and I send it to you to send to them, or I just send it to them, and they say, they're offended that you wanted to protect yourself, right? Or you wanted to make a situation a little bit better than you should be very wary about who you're partnering with, right? Because it's not like I'm marking up a contract and say, F you, like go to hell. Like I'm like, okay, so you see this line where it says you're not paying for any of these travel costs? This is not a person who has a ton of money. Can you please just help them make this flight? I'm not, like, again, it's not, I don't know, I think there's this thing of like, people think, if you mark up a contract or you try to push back, you're like yelling at them, sort of, And I'm like, man, it's like, it's not really like that. Maybe I'm a lawyer, so I don't think it's like that, but it's more like, I'm so excited for this opportunity. Okay, what if we tweaked this here? This would make my life so much easier. It's conversational. It's not adversarial until it needs to be. But, at least in the initial draft, it's like, I'm so excited for this opportunity. I cannot wait to start. I have no money, so paying for a flight to New Orleans is going to be really fucking hard for me. Paying for the Ubers, to and from the airport and the hotel and the production set's going to be really hard for me. Paying for my room is going to be really hard for me. You could possibly push me to a place where I would do it, but it's going to be really hard for me. And I just want to be able to focus on the work. I don't want to have to be focused on like, okay, I need to wake up an hour early. I don't even know. I've never been to New Orleans, but I need to wake up an hour early so I can catch the bus, so I can, and then I need to be sure that maybe I go to this gas station and get a sandwich so I'm not hungry on set, so I can focus, like it's common. I tell people like the initial draft is like conversational. It's just like, let's just change this so I can be super present for the job, and I just wish, for whatever reason, I keep saying that phrase, but my young white clients are like so like adversarial, like they're just like, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this, and I'm like, you have 0 acting credits, but it's good, it's good to be, demand and know your worth, and ask for better, for sure.
Okay.
So what are like standard contracts that you see people encountering? I guess we could focus on film for now, but I'm curious about film and television. But I'd love for you to talk about film for now.
Yeah, I think the most standard is just your standard acting agreement. And so that you'll have that. In film, you'll have, it's called an actor's agreement. And TV, it's usually called like a weekly contract. And so it's just a contract that, occurs over a series of weeks. But I mean, for at least actors, those two are kind of the bread and butter. But like, again, in my practice, we deal with television and film actors outside of television and film. So if they're doing like a sponsorship deal or something, we definitely see those, or we definitely see I don't know, any type of deal that they're doing. But in terms of like the TV world and the film world, the main, I guess, 2 agreements that you usually see for actors will be like the actor agreement, and then the weekly contract, and then of course you'll see nudity writers, which are just which I didn't know until I joined the firm, but they're like, if there's ever sex scenes or something in there, that has to be separately negotiated.
Oh, wow. Okay. So the actor agreement is an agreement to perform on the project?
Exactly. To they're engaging you for acting services on the project.
And then the weekly agreement is your salary, your pay.
Well,
payment?
I mean, the weekly agreement is just what the acting agreement is called in the TV world. So for like in the film world, they'll be like, okay, um, we're engaging your services for this movie, and the movie is projected. Principal photography of the movie is projected for 2 months, right? So they're just engaging your services for that 2 months. The weekly contract is the same idea, but it's just different scheduling. Like they'll be like, okay, we're engaging you for 13 weeks, um, and here's what your weekly salary will be paid as, rather than the acting agreement, which is just like, here's what you're going to be paid to be in this movie. But it's I don't know, it's a lot of like labelings that are different, but it's just how it's just like the terms that they're using the different mediums.
Okay. And within those agreements, should you like negotiate certain things, like before you mentioned, like maybe help with travel,
Yeah,
lodging, meals,
yeah, for sure. I think like it's actually like there's a lot of things like the way to think of it is that you and if we're talking about standard forms, the first half of the contract is like the lawyer and your agent and your manager will really make sure it's tight, because the first half of the contract is always going to be how much are you being paid, how long do you have to actually be on set, how are you exclusive, right? Which means, if you are in New Orleans, right, and you've done all of your principal, if you've done all of your acting for the day, or you're performing for the day, well, let's say you have another commercial you could shoot at night. Like, are you able to do that? Some agreements say you're exclusive and you cannot do anything else. You cannot work during the time that we need you for. Some agreements say, this is non-exclusive. You can, as long as there's no quote unquote material interference with the services you're to provide for us, you feel free to at night go shoot a commercial. We don't care. So the first half of the contract is going to always deal with the things that the managers, the agents, and the lawyers care about, and they will probably make sure your best, or not probably, they definitely will make sure your best interests are protected in the first half. The second half is again where the lawyer should really, and this comes into the lawyer impartiality, but the second half of the contract, or the back half of the contract, is really the things that I think actors like really, really care about and really, really get mad about whenever things go wrong on set. So, for example, the second half of the contract will have, the look of your character. And this I think is really important for Black women, Black women creatives. But you will have like things that dictate like what is to be done with your hair. And so whether or not they can cut it, whether or not you need a stylist that's approved by you, whether or not whatever they say you need to do to your hair, are they going to pay for it to be done? Are they not going to pay for it to be done once you're done filming? Are they going to pay for it for you to get your hair done? If you had braids, to get your hair rebraided. And so then there's other language like, and for your dressing room, is your dressing room shared amongst all people? Is it only shared with the women on the set, women of the cast? Is it just you by yourself? Does it include, first class amenities? And then there's just stuff like we were talking about, like transportation. And then you have like fun stuff, right? So you have, I read something crazy on Twitter the other day, which was, I think I always read something crazy on Twitter.
I know, right?
But there was something about Octavia Spencer had to buy or enter a lottery to get a ticket to go to the Academy Awards for Green Book, even though she's an executive producer, right?
Wow.
And to me, yeah, like, right? And I was like, wait, what? And to me, that was insane, because like not the one, but like one of the provisions that is just so drilled into our head that like the client will actually pick up the phone and like, be incensed and yell at you for. There's a provision in the back half of the agreement that concerns premieres, right, and award ceremonies. And so you always want to make sure that included in that, I mean, that would be an EP agreement, but included in any of your clients' agreements, they obviously are getting tickets to awards, festivals, or premieres, right? So I think like Joe Robert Cole, I think is his name, he wrote Black Panther, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I didn't see him a ton in a lot of the premieres or a lot of the like, high profile stuff, like, but maybe that was just like, he didn't want it or something. But I would have made sure that he has tickets certainly to all of the premieres in China and LA and New York and Atlanta, and he's all that travel, which is promotion and publicity, is being taken care of, right? Because you don't want to be in a situation where you represent Joe Robert Cole and he's like, man, Kugler's out here, Lupita's out here. People are like, yo, Joe, why aren't you out there, So that back half, I think, is really where a lot of the talent feels the deal. Do you know what I mean? Like like a lot of the front half is theoretical and it's like, making sure everything's okay. But the back half is where a lot of the talent actually feels the weight of, the experience of the engagement.
I didn't know all of that was included.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't want to ramble, but there's a lot of stuff that happens in these agreements for sure.
And what about in regards to agreements for filmmakers? Like what are some basic mistakes that you see new filmmakers making?
Yeah, so again, like, let's say you're a young director, right? And you're working with a really exciting producer. I would say there's, again, like this, I don't know, I feel like a lot of this circles to a lot of good things we were talking about earlier, but a lot of this stuff is like, I think if you have a young filmmaker who has an exciting opportunity to direct a film, they're gonna be like, man, I don't wanna push back, I don't wanna lose this, But the things I would tell them to look out for is, who gets final cut, right? How long are you tied to the project? Are you exclusive to the project until the absolute final cut? Because sometimes, right, there's a director's cut. There can be a TV cut, like to cut to put it on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And then there can be like an airline cut, like a cut to make it, viewable on planes and stuff like that. And so a lot of those cuts could take, or you're in post-production for, I don't know, post-production often longer times than you're in principal photography. And so, you want to make sure, like, look, I want the ability to, I've already been paid for this job. So the longer I'm in this, the more, but like, I'm not making any more money. This is basically unpaid overtime.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to be able to take on more jobs, and I don't want to just be stuck in post-production with you, producer. So that's one thing. Another thing is, I would, sometimes the producers like to incentivize, or not incentivize, but they put in language around like, okay, well, we get basically like a first look at your next project. Like we'll work with you on film A, but you have to give us the right to refuse your next creative idea. And so, like, I feel like some of my clients or some people have, not thought that was a big deal, but maybe it is, like maybe, this first one is a super, super success. And then you're tied to this producer that you kind of hate for the next one. So that's another thing I would look out for. And then the third thing is just going back to, being exclusive. Like, you really, really just want to watch out for that, because that is probably how you get hurt the most. And music contracts and and music contracts exclusivity is a little bit even more dangerous. But in film, film and TV, it can be dangerous too, which is just if you don't have to be working on something, and if something doesn't need your full undivided attention, you should be able to make more money and to participate in more opportunities. So those are the things I would say, at least like a filmmaker should definitely be looking out for us. And of course, it goes without saying, like the back end. I mean, I don't even know if we have time for the back end, but your back end participation has to be reviewed with a fine-tooth comb. Like that is, that's really how you're making. That's how you make your quote unquote royalties, right? Like how much, what is your participation in the gross profits? You obviously don't. I think it suffices now to say, like, your compensation, maybe you get paid $50,000, but let's say you directed A Quiet Place. Let's say you directed some of these movies that are made for like $2 million and they go on to make $100 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you want to be sure that you're participating. Like the bar, the basement is that you're participating in the back end. The kind of living room floor level is like how much are you participating in the back end. And that, I mean, the back end is so complicated. I think I have I have a working knowledge of the back end, but the back end can get so complicated, and that's something you really, really need a lawyer for, because it's one of those provisions that says, like, the defined net proceeds are this and this and this minus this and this and this, but there's this and this and this and then this and this and this. You just got to be really, really thorough when you start talking about back end, for sure, because that's how you can make a lot of money if you have a runaway hit and you want to be super. And the back end is where that good stuff comes from.
So you were talking earlier about some terms and contracts that you saw where that were alarming. What do you think studios or production companies, et cetera, try to pull off for people who are not as aware or not as educated on like the law?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
terms,
I think
different terms.
I think at least in like, so in the music industry, it's a little bit more alarming, right? Because you'll have basically 360 deals.
Oh yeah.
Where people, where labels or managers are taking cut of like everything you do, even if they're not sourcing them, right? So if you're out here doing all this crazy work, or you got this deal with Sprite and they're like, oh well, we get a cut of that too. And so that's why I say it's a little bit scarier. I mean, especially if you have a manager in the film world, if you have a manager contract, you need to make sure there's like not 360 language in that.
Are they trying 360 deals with film and TV?
Well, I mean, your manager would definitely. I could easily. I mean, I haven't read a ton of manager actor contracts because like that would just be. I could, because that would mean an actor reached out to me before they had a manager. That would just be, usually like I'm just dealing with friends. But if they ever sent me like, oh, I'm thinking about bringing on this manager, can you read the agreement? I could easily see a manager being like, I get a cut of everything you do inside of film, TV. If you do any on-air hosting for any like award show or something, I get a cut of everything. I could easily see that for sure. So yeah, I mean, like there's just so much tricky dark art stuff that like a lot of people try to pull on, people who just really, really want to work and aren't in a position like you guys are saying to like feel like they have that leverage. But I think probably the most common area that, at least the people I work with and, things I've seen are exclusivity. like and that can appear in so many different ways. For example, let's say someone like for up until now, I've just been talking about exclusivity in terms of like how long I have to be with you, but there's also exclusivity in the form of like what type of work I can even take, right? So it can be like, if I'm an actor and Apple hires me, right? They can be like, look, you can do any projects that after this, like the day this agreement ends, the day you're done providing services, you can do whatever the hell you want, except for any company that has a similar product to the iPhone, right? So that eliminates you from, and then they'll say like, we need this for like 2 years. And so if you're not careful and you don't catch that language, you could end this iPhone commercial, and then Google Pixel or Android or whoever could come to you in 2 weeks and be like, oh, we want you to be in this commercial. And then you could do this commercial, you'll be on set, and Apple could be like, look, we found this out, here's this language, she needs to get off set immediately. And so, there's exclusivity in terms of like how long you're working on something, right? But there's also exclusivity in the forms of like what you're able to work on. Sometimes people will say like, we have this person exclusive in all of TV, or they'll say we have an exclusive in all of like, any motion picture, or sometimes they'll just say in all of media. So for example, what that means is Mahershala Ali, right? So let's say the production company for Green Book was like, we have you, while you're engaged, we have you exclusive in all media. And that means he couldn't have done True Detective. Or let's say whoever puts together, is HBO puts together True Detective, and they say, not only do we have you in TV, but we have you in all media. So then he couldn't do Green Book. So like it's not just about like how long do we have you, it's also about like in what universe or what territory do we have you in. So that's something, and he got an Oscar for Green Book, and he's probably going to get an Emmy for True Detective.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it's like that you want to, like, his lawyer, good on them. Like, they made sure, like, look, he's not exclusive in all media. He might be, I don't even know, he might be exclusive in TV. So HBO, you got that. He'll do True Detective, but he's going to be also working on other stuff in film and theater, maybe,
Yeah, I've heard that HBO likes to keep their talent exclusive to television.
Yeah, and I believe that. I mean, it makes sense. I think if I ever was on the production side, I definitely can understand why, because you want people to think of Mahershala in TV, and you want to think of him in True Detective, and not like 3 different series. So I understand it, but that's something I think the lawyer at least should be aware of.
So it's something that people should expect the further they go into their career and the bigger the platforms they work on, basically.
Exactly. And it, it's not just production companies. It's like, if you want to do, I don't know, what's that show? Like any of those, like James Corden or stuff, like, I don't know, any of those like TV shows, like they can have exclusivity clauses too, or any game shows, or you just got to be like, I don't know. I wish this stuff could be done by like, I wish someone could read a contract, like a creative could read a contract and like at least like 80% understand it, but a lot of this stuff is sneaky, man. And like
it is,
you'll see, like there'll be like I'm thinking of, there was this agreement I reviewed, and without getting into the weeds of it, like there's this clause that says you basically have to protect the producer if the producer gets sued for anything you do in breach of the contract, right? And there are literally like three, and that can be fairly standard, right? But there are like three words that take fairly standard rep, or that fairly standard agreement, from like a 3 problematic to like a 12 problematic, right? And like, because it just expands the universe of things that they could be like, hey, you need to protect. We're getting sued. You need to protect us, and you need to pay for all of our costs, right? And it's just in the words or arising out of, right? And it's just like, those are such harmless and innocuous words, it seems like, but in practice, those three words in that specific clause I'm talking about, that could literally, they could invoke that clause on so many different things by hooking it on those three words. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's like, and that's just that's one example. There's so many other just really weird and ad hoc examples of like, oh, those little words just actually changed the mechanics of this thing, and now this client is on the hook. So I wish a lot of people could just review their own contracts and sit down and look at it with a pen. But a lot of this stuff is like, unless you know the industry, unless you know the terms of art, you would naturally and understandably just miss it. So I think it is important to befriend a lawyer, or talk to your have like a really heart to heart with your manager about like what are we signing, and like are you able to review this at a legal level, or like a lawyer's level, or are you working coordination with someone? But yeah, there's a lot of little hidden pitfalls that unfortunately some people get hit with.
What about streaming platforms? Do you feel like there's a difference in the way that they negotiate versus like traditional television and film?
That's interesting. I don't feel like
No.
I feel like there's I don't feel like there's like a crazy difference. I'm impressed by it. I'm always impressed by the Netflix attorneys. I'll say that. I don't know if that, like, they're just really sharp, and they're really on it, and they kind of make you have to step up your game. I don't know if that's I don't know really what, maybe that's just like Netflix is a cool place to work. Amazon television seems like a cool place to work. So really impressive people go there, but I definitely feel like when you're negotiating against them, it's you're playing the game's a little faster for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if that trickles down to how the client feels, right?
At what point should filmmakers secure copyrights for their work? You think it's ever too early?
No. No. Like, no, never. Like, yesterday, 2 years ago, 10 years ago, I don't know. Like, yeah, protect yourself. And again, like, there's always provision. Oh man, I'm really, even talking to you guys, I'm just realizing how many pitfalls there are. Like, there will be language which, again, it's usually always three words. But it'll be something like if you're in a director agreement for a production company, and there can be in terms of the copyright, there can be language in there that they say you've now assigned, or you've now as a work for hire given them anything that you've now. So there's two ways it breaks out. One is you're signing them, or they own it as a work for hire, any material made after the contract, which can be fine. But sometimes there's language in there that says like before the contract, related to the contract, or after the contract, right? And so there could be an idea you were working on before the contract, that is helping you have a base of creativity for stuff that you're doing after the contract. But what that little language can do is they can claim all of that stuff before. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so it's like, so you just have to be clear on what rights are they even getting? Are they getting, because once the clock starts with the agreement, I think everyone's clear. Like, they probably own these rights, But for example, let's say there's a comedian that wants to host, like, let's say Lil Rel. Lil Rel is going to host an award show, and he's going to host an award show for Comedy Central. And Comedy Central says, okay, we own all the jokes that you perform. We own all the jokes that you perform at this award show. And
Wow.
you have no rights. So that's pretty intense in and of itself. But you can go to Lil Rel and you can be like, look, anything you say at this award show, they own. So be careful about what you say. That's fine. But then there's also language in the same contract, or can be in the same contract, which says, like, if you've, basically the way it comes out is you want to exclude existing material, right? Material that already exists with Lil Rel. So if you don't catch that, and if you don't exclude that, then Comedy Central is going to be like, look, even though you owned that joke and you performed that joke before this contract, you performed it again on our award show, and so now we own it. Right? And so you want to be like, okay, what are the rights? Like you're saying, who owns the rights? But like, is there any transfer of the rights? And often there is, because understandably, again, if I would work for a production company, I want to be like, look, if Lil Rel, if we hire you to work on this, to come to this award show, this roast or whatever, and you perform all these jokes, I don't want you to say you own them, because I just want to be able to do whatever I want to be able to do with this award show. If I want to sell it, if I want to put in a DVD, if I want to stream it, I don't have to keep coming to you and asking you for permission to show these jokes. So I just own them. The danger is that, Lil Rel has this, I think it's easier with Aziz. Aziz used to have this really funny, I forget what it's even called now, but he used to have this really funny character that he always performed. Randy, right? And yeah, exactly. And so he had Randy, and Randy was really funny, but everyone knew that was Randy, right? And everyone knew that was Aziz, and Aziz's, creative property. And if you weren't careful, you could get in a situation where Aziz performed Randy on Comedy Central, and then Comedy Central's like, we own Randy now, and so you just get in, you just gotta, I don't know, it's hard, man, and you gotta make sure that, like, in terms of your copyrights, you're very clear on what you own and what you are transferring ownership when you are engaged by a production company or whoever.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely imperative.
Yep.
So in regards to screenwriting, or screenplays rather,
Mm-hmm.
let's say I write a screenplay and I send it to a colleague via email, without having it copywritten, and 2 years later it's a feature film and it's made a bunch of money. Like, what legal wiggle room do I have there?
I mean, that's the biggest fear, I think, of any young writer.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is, like, you want to get it registered. You want to be very careful about sending it to other people. But it's like, it depends if it's, and it's always hard, if the paper trail is there, then the paper trail is there. And, like, I'm sure a great litigator can, like, show that they stole your, because, I mean, you don't have to, like, as soon as you create something, you own the copyright, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, when you registering it is just formalizing the process. Like, if I write a novel, I own and I don't register it, I own the copyright because it's my creative output. Registering it just makes it clear, and makes it a lot easier, and makes the litigation a lot easier. But it's not like I don't own the copyright if I don't register it. Registering it just formalizes it. So if someone straight up stole something that you put into written form, there obviously would be legal ramifications. The only caveat is that like proving it is going to be harder.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's two. Step one is like, do you own this copyright? Step two is like, can you even prove that? Like, and then can you even prove? And that's why I tell people, like, a lot of people are submitting their best screenplays and their best ideas to like a lot of these like open calls stuff.
Yes, these like
And
contests.
I'm like,
Yeah, I'm concerned about that too. Yeah.
yeah. So it's like without naming names, like I like a lot of these production companies, but you read the disclaimer, and the disclaimer obviously is drafted by their lawyer and obviously protects the hell out of them. And the disclaimer is like, anything you submit, you're aware that we may receive something else completely identical to it. And the fact that we produce anything that's completely identical to your work that you submitted does not indicate that we've at all, stolen from you. And so please sign this before, or please acknowledge this before submitting. And so that's twofold, right? It's like, man, like that would be so hard to prove that they stole your thing, right? Because they could just say, oh no, or they'll say, someone else may submit it, right? So you may have an issue of where you submit something and someone else submitted the same idea, right? Which, would be harder for them to prove. Or they could say, or we were internally working on it already at the time of your submission, right? So you send this brilliant idea for a futuristic something or other, they see it, they don't, obviously they don't write anything down, they don't acknowledge it, but then they're inspired, and then they start developing a very similar idea. And then a year and a half later, their movie comes out, and you're like, that is my idea. And I submitted it when they had an open call. And then they say, oh yeah, but you signed this, and you're aware that we may have just been working on it at the same time. And look, you sent it on March 5th. And on March 5th, I randomly and unconnected to your submission at all, I randomly started talking about a similar idea with my colleagues. And here's the email that shows that. I don't know, then you're ass out of luck, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's just, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I worked in reality development, and they had a lot of similar clauses when people submitted ideas, say, we're not liable, we're probably developing something similar. Once you sign this, that you give your right away to not sue us for stealing your idea.
Yeah, so those are dangerous.
Yeah, it's really risky.
Those are super risky, and even just sharing your ideas with friends, unfortunately, is something that it's a value proposition. You just got to be like, do I trust this person? Am I okay with whatever happens? Blah blah blah. Because if the industry always needs great written material, and there will always be people who are looking to somehow produce that one way or the other. And so you gotta keep your head on a swivel, so to say. If something's your true baby, then again, this ties back into leverage. Like, tell if you have a meeting with Disney, right? If Disney, I don't know, if Disney or Netflix heard a pitch or something that you were working on, they really like your idea, and they're like, oh, come in. And, a lot of my friends are like, oh, we have all these meetings. We have all these meetings with Macro. I'm not saying Macro's doing anything, but we have a meeting with Macro, and we have a meeting with Netflix, and we have a meeting with Monkey Paw, and we have a meeting with Issa Rae's thing, and we have all these meetings. And they're like, come in and pitch to us whatever you're working on. I'm like, yo, why don't you ask them to sign an NDA?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you ask them to sign a confidential agreement? All right, we did, but they said no. Okay, well, like, that tells you everything. Like, that, I don't know, that's fine. Go ahead, go pitch. But like, they just said no to signing a confidentiality agreement with you. So I hope we're all on the same page with what that means, right? Like, like now you're going in, and now they met you, and they quote unquote met someone else, and they met someone else, and they came up with an idea, maybe it wasn't quote unquote yours. It's like, if I think sometimes a lot of my friends, and this is like personal, a lot of my personal friends are so excited to go into like all these meetings. And, I'm just like, man, just ask them to sign an NDA. And they're like, nah, I don't want to scare them off. I'm like, all right.
It's worth a shot.
At least, yeah, exactly. Even if they say no, you can still go into the meeting, but at least you know what the universe is now, right? Like,
yeah,
if they say, listen, we're not holding anything you tell us confidential, and we are not promising that we're not going to work on whatever you tell us. You just know, right? Like, now when you go into that room, look, whatever you say to these people, if you say the next Insecure, you say the next Atlanta, and you see that thing in development in 6 months with that same people you're in the same room with, I don't know. You knew, at least you knew that you didn't have a confidentiality agreement.
Yeah. That's
and
a risk that people are willing to take,
Yeah, again, it ties back into what we were saying earlier, which is I completely understand why, at least me too, like, people are so desperate to get on, it's hard out here and you really, really want to make it. Shit, me too. Like I said, me too. But, man, like they're not good people. And I'm not saying people are not good at any of these production companies. I'm just saying, people are, will take advantage of what they can take advantage of. And you just gotta, keep your head on swivel and make sure you protect yourself for sure.
Are there any additional resources that, beginning, new coming artists can look into that, would provide legal advice or counsel, but don't break the bank in the ways that you said? Because I know that the firm route with the commission rate is one approach, but is there anything else out there that you would recommend?
Man, I mean, there's like, obviously, like, there's a lot of, I mean, I read them, but I don't know if they'd be helpful to other people, but like, there's a lot of like books on entertainment law. Like when I was trying to break into entertainment law, like I was just reading a lot of those, and like, that's way too like in the weeds for someone who's like clearly concerned about other stuff. But I really do wish there was like a cheat sheet. Maybe I should just make one. But I wish there was like, I know. This conversation has come up so many times, especially in the music industry, where I'm friends with like a lot of like young A&Rs and stuff like that. And I'm just like, man, maybe I should just make a freaking little, I don't know, 1-pager of like, flow chart or something. But anyway, I really do wish there was, I don't know, man, that's unfortunate. I wish there was something that, kind of was a cheat sheet for like, look, this won't get you all the way. This won't, but it'll get you pretty far. It'll just point out the big issues, without a lawyer or a manager, reading over your shoulder. But there's a lot of the solo practitioners. They're really, really good solo practitioners, young solo practitioners too, that are out in, probably the major cities, unfortunately. So like your LA and your New York and your Atlanta. But I like if some, I'm sure there's brilliant young creatives in Indiana, and I'm sure it's harder to find, a plethora of young Black solo practitioners who are in the entertainment law. So yeah, I mean, I think it's hard. There's no easy answers. I think the biggest takeaway though is that like you are not obligated to sign something just because someone gave it to you, and you're not accepting whatever they give you is not the default. Like if someone, whatever, I tell my music friends this all the time. Whenever a label or studio or production company gives you a contract, they're not giving you, almost by definition, they're not giving you a fair contract. That would literally make no sense. whatsoever.
Mhm.
And if you ever sign a contract as is, you're signing an unfavorable contract, right? Because why would they be paying their lawyers to make a fair contract? By definition, like
Yeah.
that doesn't. When I was first starting, I was like, in corporate and both, early in my entertainment career, I was getting yelled at because I was like, oh, well, this is more fair. Like people were like, why did you make this change? I was like, oh, it's fair, and when the other side sees it, they're gonna be like, oh, this is a fair contract. I'm like, don't make it fair. Let them make it fair.
Yeah.
Just make sure we're protected, make sure we have the most favorable thing, because we have to go up the chain and people are like, why is this contract fair? Like, they don't want fair, they want to hand talent an unfavorable contract, unfavorable to the talent, right? So if you're signing anything as is, you're signing an unfavorable contract. That doesn't mean you're going to be killed or die, or your firstborn is going to be taken or something crazy, but you're just not signing a favorable contract almost by definition. So I would, in some type of Jay-Z 444 where he puts people on to what is the new wave, XYZ, like the new wave needs to be like, if you're signing a contract as is, you're signing a bad contract. And so, I just hope people kind of approach it from that angle, and I think that will hopefully bear fruit, because then people will be like, okay, well, how is it unfair? Like, where is the unfairness? Where's the bad, unfavorable language? And that'll lead them down kind of the path of looking at the exclusivity, looking at the location and, costs, and, if they're getting a per diem, and if they're getting their put back, like hopefully just knowing you're signing a bad contract, if you sign it as is, will hopefully just lead people down the path of being a little curious about where it's bad.
Wow, that's incredibly insightful. We appreciate we appreciate you joining us on the Black Film Space.
Yeah, of course.
Podcast. I appreciate that. Is there anywhere people can find you on social media or reach out?
Yeah, for sure. My Twitter handle is KYALBR, and my DMs are open. I respond to. Seriously, like the creatives always reach out and they're like, okay, this is that. I'm like, yeah, well, think about this, think about that, think about this. And so I keep them open for a reason. Like I'm always, whenever people reach out, I always try to respond and give some insight, So more than happy to do so, for sure.
All right. Thank you so much, Kyle.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Black Film Space podcast. If you're interested in being part of our community and attending events, please visit us at blackfilmspace.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Black Film Space. Subscribe to our email list and podcast. All right, thanks. See you soon.